Chapter 5. Right crowd, wrong crowd. Do not make friends with a hot tempered man. Do not associate with one easily angered, or you may learn his ways and get yourself ensnared. Proverbs chapter 22, 25 to 25. I recently read a survey indicating peer pressure had surpassed parents as the strongest influence in the l- lives of American teenagers. We must do everything in our power then to positively influence the influencers. Recruit positive role models. Teenagers and preteens idolize and imitate college students. House parents Doug and Julie Bowling takes advantage of that fact by actively seeking college students with high moral standards and strong character, then creating opportunity for their children to spend time with them. Recently, Julie has been mentoring a Berry College sophomore who plays on the women's basketball team and is a great Christian girl. She comes by the house to visit Julie, then spend time with the children who hang over all over her. The bowling also hosts a Bible study in their home led by a Berry student who brings his guitar and teaches the children course before the student arrive. As many as 75 college students have attended, and the bowling kids participate in the first part of the program. Intentionally seek influencers for the children you want to influence. Then create opportunity for them to be together. Take them to a ball game or hire them to babysit. Then watch what happens. 2 words attitude adjustment. Chick-fil-A restaurant operator adhere to the same principle when hiring team members. They know it's much easier to hire a good attitude than to change a bad one. They also know that every smile they hire is infectious, but every attitude can take a little adjustment. Good habits can bridge the gap on those days when we are not feeling spur. For example, a few years ago, I asked everyone at Chick fil A to say my pleasure whenever anyone thanked them. Almost immediately, I began receiving letters from customers commenting on our culture's people, saying my pleasure instead of you're welcome or no problem. Also reminded each of us that we truly to enjoy our work and serving others, even on our bad days. Like most good habits, it's a little things that makes a big difference. Bad attitudes are infectious too. I asked my friend Kevin what he thought it might take to keep him out of trouble. This was at our lunch a few weeks before his most recent incursions. He sat across the table from me and said, I am at the point in my life now where I have to put 100% effort into keeping out of trouble and doing the right thing. If I don't, I will be in jail. He said his wife helps by trying to keep him away from his old friends who are still doing bad things. But I can't walk away from the guy I have known all my life, he confessed. When he tells her he's going to hang out with the guys, she immediately says, I will come with you. She knows the power of negative influence. Proverbs 20 to 25 warns that when you hang around with the wrong crowd, you may learn their ways and get yourself ensnared. Kevin can't blame all his troubles on his friends, but if he had followed his wife's good advice, he might be home with his family instead of in prison. The power of sex. I am no longer amazed by the stories I hear from children, broken-hearted but not amazed. Shortly after a baby came to live in one of our foster homes, he and I were talking about his mother. I asked him what kind of work she did. She takes off her clothes and dances, he said, everything but her shoes. I was stunned that this little boy would know such a thing about his mother, and I hope he was mistaken. I asked, how do you know that? Sometimes I have to go with her to work, he said. How is that child going to make responsible, normal decisions when he grows up? His mother, more than anybody, should understand the power of sex to destroy a life. Proverbs chapter 22, 14 verse says, the mouth of an adulteress is a deep pit. He who is under the Lord's wrath will fall into it. In the time since I began working on this book, two of the young men I admire most, men I have known and loved since they were young teens, have fallen into other trust relationships, and it breaks my heart. William, not his real name, was in my Sunday school class as a boy, and through the years he had impressed me so much with his generosity. And I asked him to talk to my Sunday school class one morning. But when Sunday came around, he didn't show up. He came to church after class and told me that he couldn't face the boys that morning because of some family problems he was having. I asked if it was anything I could help him with, and he said another woman had come into his life through his work. They had gone to lunch together and had shared each other's problems. He was attracted to her. He was being tempted. William asked me to pray that God might help him overcome the temptation he was experiencing, and we prayed together. On Tuesday morning, William's wife called and told me William had not come home the night before. I later learned that William had spent the previous Friday night before we met at church with the woman from work. Not long after that, William left his wife and their two small children and moved into an apartment with his girlfriend, who is married and has an 8-year-old daughter. I called William and tried to reason with him to convince him that he was making a trouble mistake. But he said, she loves me and I love her. You don't love her, I said. You love each other's bodies, but you don't love each other. Wait until you get sick or something like that and have to have someone to nurse you. And then see how far from your love goes. And what about your wife? I love her too, he said. Do you? I asked. What's the seventh commandment? Thou shalt not commit adultery, he said. He had learned the answer 1,000 years earlier in my Sunday school class. What's the seventh commandment? I asked again. Thou shalt not commit adultery, he said. What's the seventh commandment? I asked once more. Thou shalt not commit adultery, he said, almost in tears. God gave us the gift of a conscience, a way of telling us when we're going into wrong direction. And William's conscience was working on him. Tell me your game, William, I asked. I said, hoping my words and his conscience would shake him up. I tried to drive the point home from him. He knows what he's doing, but he says he's willing to accept the consequences. William will suffer the consequence of his decisions for ignoring his conscience and doing what he knew was wrong, and the pains will be felt by his children, just as William felt similar pain years ago. You see, William grew up in a divided home. His father had a problem with alcohol and left his family for another woman. William had told me years ago of his bitter experience as a child in that situation. Now, he's putting his children through the same thing. One time will hurt. Young people are naturally curious about drugs, alcohol, and sex. They want to experiment and they tell themselves, one time won't hurt. So they try just once and nothing bad happens. They don't get caught. The girls didn't get pregnant, so they do it again and again. And before long, they have a habit and they begin to reap the consequence of their initial decisions. A boy who had been in my Sunday school class was having problem in his home. He was 15 years old and he called to tell me he had gotten the neighborhood girl pregnant. I didn't mean to do that, he said, and he went on to describe the circumstance. He didn't want to tell his parents what had happened, and he wanted my help. There's no way I can help you, I said. You're just going to have to face up to your parents, and they're going to have to help you. Reminding Pierre, the word sex was never spoken in my home when I was a child. My mother, my dad, and my Sunday school teachers never mentioned sex. Sex was not taught in school when I was coming along. The only place I find out about sex was in the schoolyard, and I didn't understand a lot about it. Like how some girls got pregnant and others didn't. I had no one to ask. Others still feel uncomfortable talking to children about sex. And the world is telling kids so much about it that if you wait too long, they will know more than you do. They are getting too much sex education from television magazines and the internet. If our children are to remain pure, we must do three things: pray for them, model purity, talk to them about remaining pure. This is your responsibility as a parent. It's your job. When I talk with young people about sex, I tell them how important it is to present their bodies to their spouse unstained, to remain virgin until marriage. What a gift you can give your mate. If you choose otherwise, I tell them, it reminds me of a merchandise you find in the bargain basement of the department store. There's a sign that says slightly stained and the price is greatly reduced. It takes a tremendous amount of self-control, especially in this world, to remain pure. The key is to avoid putting yourself into a position where temptations and opportunity arise. I have often told my Sunday school boys that sex is God's gift to individuals, but it's the devil's playground. So a lot of boys get in trouble just playing around, putting their hands where they should have be, stimulating themselves to the point of no return. It happens so many times. A girl comes in and tells her mother she's pregnant and she didn't even plan to have sex. But if the situation is right and the temptation is great, wrong things can happen. Some churches encouraging their young people to sign a commitment that they will abstain from sex until they are married. If a child decides in advance that the answer is no, then he or she may find it easier to say no to compromising situations. Our children have asked our grandchildren to make a commitment to remaining pure. For example, Trudy and John present each of their children a promise ring on their 15th birthday, and the child receiving the ring sign a commitment. With this ring, I promise before God, my parents, my sister, and my brother, that my body will remain pure and holy. I agree to refrain from any sexual conduct that would contradict Christian principles taught to me by my present based on God's holy word. This ring will be constant reminder to me of God's great love and faithfulness to live his life taught me through me. Whenever tempted to give in to my sexual desire, this ring will help me recall Psalm 46:1. God is my refuge and strength, a very present help me in trouble. Upon receiving this ring, I also promise to abstain from any use of alcohol, drugs, or tobacco. With this commitment, I can present to my future wife a vessel clean and beautiful. In turn, I ask the Lord to give to me a wife whose past has been equally committed to my Lord, never having yielded to premarital sex, alcohol, drugs, or tobacco. I am committed to search and wait for such a woman so that our life together can begin with God's plan for marriage. Truly, John and all the children also signed the commitment as witness, and in doing so, they each are reminded of the commitment to purity they made or will make when they turn 15. Notice the emphasis on abstinence from alcohol and drug use. I remind teenagers that one of the quickest way to find themselves in compromising situation is through alcohol. I learned from my children the power of modeling abstinence years ago. When I was actively involved in the Georgia Restaurant Association, I attended events where wine was served, and occasionally I would have a glass. Then, when our children came along, Janet and I decided never to have wine at our table. Our children were watching us closely, and we didn't want to send the wrong message about what we said and did. Another time, our family was at a dinner where there was a wine tasting. I was curious about the various wines. I picked up a glass through the ask, Daddy, you're not going to drink that, are you? I put it down quickly and said, No, I'm not. She was putting me to the test. Children are always putting us to the test, whether she knows it or not. We must be aware of the message we send. Inspiring speaker Zig Ziglar tells a similar story about his son. Jake had stopped drinking after asking himself the question, does it glorify God? Not long after that, he and his wife went out to celebrate their anniversary. The owner of the restaurant, who was a friend of theirs, gave them a bottle of wine. But I didn't have the courage at the point to say, "We don't drink," Jake recalls. And they drank some of the wine. When they got home, their 7 years old son asked, "Dad, did you drink any wine or anything?" Jake admitted that they had, and he recalls, "If I live to be 1,000, I will never forget his exact words. He looked right at me and softly said, 'Dad, I cannot begin to tell you how disappointed I am in you.' Children are watching everything we do. The world is also testing us. Our family was on vacation at Daytona Beach. I suggested that we go watch the dog run at the racetrack. Again, Trudy, who was an adult by then, spoke up and asked, "Dad, are we really going in there? Is that a place where you would take your Sunday school boys?" I explained that we were not going to do any gamble or drinking. We're just going to watch the dogs run. So we went in and we didn't stay long. As we left, I heard someone holler, "Hey, Troy, Kathy," as though he was announcing to the world that I had arrived. Of course, I assumed he was there to gamble, and I'm sure he was assumed the same of me. We must be careful about what we say and do, not only to keep ourselves pure, but because people, especially chicken, are watching us and taking their cue from us. As our culture continues to bombard young people with sexual image and temptations, I try to think about other ways to reverse the trend. I have even considered offering a monetary reward for remaining sexually pure, but Janice reminds me that we should not pay people for doing something that's right. You may wonder why is this day when everybody's doing it. I speak out so strongly against premature sex. I believe God requires acceptance because He knows that sex is a potential time bomb in our marriage. A person who had premature sex is more likely to engage in adultery and risk family devastation. William has told me that was the case with him. His wife was 2 months pregnant when they married. At least he did the honorable things and married her. Some will say, and sometimes marriages that begin after pregnancy work out remarkably well. Unfortunately for William's family and thousands of others, one floor of sexual misconduct begets to another. So I will continue to talk about abstinence with my Sunday school students. Preachers will preach on the subject, and youth directors will talk with their young people about it. But we must do more than talk. We must model the good behavior. We must become the right crowd, the kind of people we want children to spend time with and be influenced by. Thank you.